When Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, Americans were shocked and afraid of an attack over the Pacific Ocean. Newspaper headlines and editorials reflected this, and over the course of the next months, anti-Japanese American rhetoric and fear grew.
And while
the attack on Pearl Harbor may have come as a surprise for civilians, but relations between Japan and the U.S. had been eroding for at least a decade. Government surveillance of Japanese American communities had begun as early as 1935. Japan improved its military might early in the 20th century by winning a war against Russia, a much larger country. Japan began to look more and more like a threat. In a 1936 memo to the Chief of Naval Operations, President Franklin Roosevelt suggested that the names of suspect Issei would be placed on a special list of those who would be the first to be placed in a concentration camp in the event of trouble. FDR had made no secret of his distrust of Japanese people. In a newspaper column from 1925, 7 years before he was elected president, he wrote that the mingling of Asiatic blood with European or American blood produces, in 9 cases out of 10, the most unfortunate result. In 1941, with a conflict with Japan looming, reporter John Franklin Carter, under orders from President Roosevelt, sent Chicago businessman Curtis Munson to investigate Japanese American communities on the West Coast. Munson submitted his report to the president 1 month before the attack on Pearl Harbor. He reported that, for the most part, the local Japanese are loyal to the United States, or, at worst, hope that by remaining quiet they can avoid concentration camps or irresponsible mobs. The FBI and Naval Intelligence, who had been keeping tabs on Japanese American communities for years, confirmed Munson's findings. The anti-Japanese American movement on the West Coast was going strong long before Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. It was actually seen as such a politically beneficial stance that Senator James Phelan from California ran with the campaign slogan, "Keep California White," and he would hold campaign rallies and picket in front of Japanese American churches and community centers and Japanese language schools. Much of Senator Phelan's support came from farming communities in California.
White farmers opposed Japanese Americans, who owned
2 to 5% of California farmland. Japanese Americans grew 1/3 of all produce consumed in the United States in 1941. Still, the anti-Japanese American movement struggled to gain traction among the general population. However, with the added fear of an attack over the Pacific Ocean, the stress of not knowing what was going to happen, and the push from their political leadership, more and more people began to support the idea of resettling more than 120,000 persons of Japanese ancestry from the coast. On February 19th of 1942, President Roosevelt signed an executive order that granted the military the power to declare military zones on U.S. soil in times of war. This gave General DeWitt, who oversaw the United States, anything west of the Rocky Mountains, the power to declare his entire area a military zone and to order the evacuation, as they called it, of all persons of Japanese ancestry from that zone. Following the signing of Executive Order 9066, notices such as this one were posted along the West Coast. It gave instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry, who are defined as if you, your parent, grandparent, or great-grandparent had immigrated from Japan to the United States. These notices gave them instructions for what they were permitted to bring with them and where they were meant to go following what they called evacuation orders on the West Coast, after it had been deemed a military zone. Persons of Japanese ancestry were allowed to bring clothing and personal toiletries. They were told to bring their own bedding and linen. They were told to bring their own eating utensils, which are actually listed as knives, forks, spoons, plates, bowls, and cups. They were also told to bring essential personal effects for each member of the family and sufficient clothing for an undisclosed amount of time and undisclosed location. This one is from the Presidio of San Francisco, California, and it was posted on May 3rd of 1942. For Japanese Americans, this was a time of deep fear. Many of their neighbors and colleagues, their schoolmates, stopped seeing them as American. According to Jeanette Masaka, "When I went to school, I was an American. I said the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, and I really believed it. And one day, Pearl Harbor happened. You know, the Friday before, I was an American. But then when I went to school on Monday, I wasn't quite sure if I was an American." When they left for the temporary detention facilities, they had no idea how long they would be gone or what would happen to their homes and businesses. But fear of the future was muted in the face of immediate concerns. "What choice do you have?" Bill Hosokawa asked. "When you are faced with a young guy with a gun pointed at you, and he's got a very nervous trigger finger, and they say, 'This is what you guys are going to do.' You don't say, 'Now wait a minute, I'm going to stand on my constitutional rights.' It's a very difficult situation." To learn more about panic and the propaganda of the era, please watch my colleague Callie Stusey's video linked below. Thank you for watching, and keep calm.